topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksain. I am a diversity educator and a coach to help people align their actions with what they say they believe in so that what they do actually matches their values. A lot of people reach out to me. You can look at my website, which is called knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com. And I just want to say how much I enjoy being a diversity educator. And what that means to me is I educate myself by learning about all kinds of people with all kinds of backgrounds. And I think it's one of the best ways to learn about the world. I love hearing stories from people and sharing them. And I know a lot of people enjoy also listening and learning. This is, I think, a great form of education. So tonight, our show is called Embracing Collective Liberation. And we have a guest who's taught me a lot already, Deema Tamini. Deema, please join me. And I would like to read, I'm going to read your, just a little bit of your background so people have a sense of like how involved you are with community work and all kinds of things. So forgive me for reading it, but I don't want to skip over. So and you're going to talk about your finding your role in collective liberation and the collective liberation movement tonight, which I can't wait.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Deema is a nonprofit and startup founder, a community organizer and advocate for social justice, communal food systems, mutual aid, and the arts. With a tech career behind her, which is amazing because you are so young. You already have a tech career behind you. Deema brings her marketing and product development skills, as well as creativity, empathy, and leadership to all her current engagements, including local advocacy and organizing in her community of Davis, California. And she serves on the Davis Human Relations Commission and is deeply committed to social justice and collective liberation. And also, you believes in art, joy, food, and storytelling are powerful tools for fostering change and building a more just world.
All true. Thanks for having me on here.
And you also have your own media, which we'll talk about too. We can it's called AllFree and Watermelon Pages, and the people who are accessing this by the camera will see the banner streaming, but we'll say the contact information out loud too.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, because we just launched those two things. So so I'm excited to be able to share them with people and get people's thoughts. So thank you for having me as we're just kind of embarking on some new media stuff. So thanks.
Yeah. And is it all connected to embracing collective liberation? The two media
pretty
forms you just launched?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I'd say AllFree is a little broader, and it really is kind of a media and storytelling and place for people to learn how to be part of collective liberation, which I can go through what that means, how to be strong in this movement, how to be effective, and hear from people in the movement for collective liberation. And that's more what AllFree is. Watermelon Pages is more specifically focused on amplifying, sharing Palestinian voices and stories. So very much specifically focused on Palestinians, which are a big part of liberation movement. But AllFree is a little bit more encompassing of all the different ways in which we can support collective liberation, which is a broader movement.
Well, thank you. And there definitely, thanks for creating a platform for both. And it's so good. I can't wait to hear about Palestinian stories. That
Yeah.
I feel like there's been so much isolation and such limited exposure to who people are and their stories. So thank you. I think this is a great favor to the world that you're,
Yeah.
you know,
Thank you.
bringing.
Well, I mean, you're somebody who cares about hearing lots of people's voices and diversity. So this seems like a natural place to talk about the fact that Palestinian voices have not been heard for really for a very, very long time. I was inspired at the end of last year. I've always really been very interested in the fact that Palestinian stories are not heard, and in the fact that I think a lot of what we're seeing today in terms of people's apathy or unwillingness to speak up for Palestinians has to do with this almost century-long erasure of Palestinian voices and dehumanization of Palestinians in the media and by our own, elected leaders. And so we're seeing that today, very much so, with our current leaders. And I have always believed that storytelling and telling and giving amplifying the voices of Palestinians is a key part of how we start to chip away at and reverse that dehumanization. And so Watermelon Pages is really a first step for me to be involved in trying to get more Palestinian voices in front of people. And I was mentioning, late last year, I got very inspired to really push forward and do this after really seeing the media actually cover this a little bit through the interviews that they were having with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who had written a really wonderful book called The Message. And in the book, really one of his key points, he went to the West Bank and he wrote about Israel and Palestine in the last chapter of his book. And one of the key points at the end of his book and in many of his interviews was that we haven't heard Palestinian voices. We have not really been allowed as Palestinians to have any sort of voice in discussions of our own identity, in discussions of our history. We're left out of the conversation. And so I think that really inspired me to hear someone really just name that and have that covered by mainstream media. Felt like a real invitation to not only have my voice go out into the world, but also be able to bring other Palestinian voices into the forefront.
That's fantastic. And that reminds me that you're such a community organizer. I don't know if you also organize this, but the city brought a film called Where the Olive Trees Weep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was so powerful and so educational. And and people of all kinds of political backgrounds and ideologies and heritages and religions came, and I think we were all moved. I think everyone's eyes were opened because it's such untold stories, so many untold stories, and the trauma. And forgive me for getting the name of the very famous psychologist,
Gabor Mate.
Yes, he's fantastic, and he was there in the film doing trauma healing work with Palestinians, and describes so well, differentiated between PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from ongoing trauma, because it's not in the past, it's ongoing, sadly.
Yeah.
And the footage and the voices. I mean, that was, if anybody wants to open hearts and minds and eyes, I'd find that film, right, where the olive trees weep.
Yeah, it would be great if we could add that link. I think it's a wonderful film. It's eye-opening for some, for others, it's just validation to see this story be on a big screen. It is available online, and one thing to note about this story is it's most of it is about. I mean, it is about both Gaza and the West Bank, but I think a lot of the footage is kind of from the West Bank. And also, it was before October 7th. So, a lot of people, that date is a date that's constantly thrown out there, but people need to understand that the occupation and the brutality toward Palestinians has been happening for over 75 years. And so while I just want people to know when they reference this and watch this movie, it was actually filmed, I think in 2022, I believe. And the filmmakers, I believe, actually, had planned to maybe even put it out later, but I think felt compelled to get it out as soon as possible. They're amazing filmmakers. They're part of a group called, I think, Spirituality and Non-Duality. It's called Sand, and they do other films. But this film, I think, has gotten a lot of attention, and it's definitely an important one to watch if you are interested in understanding the struggle of the Palestinians.
Yeah, very, very moving. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah,
So
and another thing to know about that was when I introduced it, one of the things I did mention was that it's very rare to see these films where Palestinians are centered and their voices are there, and many different Palestinians show up in the film. But yeah, I mean, one thing I would know is there is more and more Palestinian media out there. Mo
yeah.
Amer just came out with his second series of Mo. Wonderful series, television series that's online and available on, I think it's on Netflix. But really, if you're interested or you want to learn, there are ways to find good media that presents Palestinians and their story. So that one I have just been recently watching because it just came out and it's really good. So
Yes, I was recently informed to watch it, and it's very compelling.
it's very compelling. And I would recommend watching the first series. And, if you have to do the watch many, that's fine. But they go quickly. And the first series is really great too. But he did just release the second, and it's very, very good. It's very timely because it's a lot of it is about immigration and being stateless. And there's just so much that's happening right now today, where we need to have people understand how difficult it is and how borders and all of these restrictions on immigration cause so much harm to families and people. So it's really very, very timely, and very much worth a watch.
And I think I just saw one of the episodes where the main character, Mo, short for Muhammad, talks about being stateless, just sharing with friends what it's like to be stateless. And that's really, I think, for those of us who grew up in America, that's like we can hardly even imagine what that's like. And it struck me deeply to think of all the people who are stateless and what that would feel like. And yeah, my father immigrated here, and it just made me deeply even more appreciate. I know there's a lot of great places in the world, but it made me appreciate even more what my father sacrificed
Yeah.
to come here, study medicine, meet my amazing mother, settle and have and raise children here, and what like it would be so easy to just have no idea what a gift that was.
Yeah.
To have a state. I mean, it doesn't have to be the state, but to have a country, to have a passport, um, to have a nationality that is safe and protected, and where you have rights, because
Yeah.
that's not the experience of so many people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we often take that for granted. But yeah, I mean, some of us have stories that we can tell of of our parents who had to do a lot to get that, or in some cases for people their parents still don't have that. And yeah, it is blessing, it is a blessing, but I think especially in this series with Mo, it sort of shows you how difficult it is to be a stateless person. What difficulty that creates for people, but also if you are on the path to try to get citizenship or try to become not stateless, oh my goodness, it's just like it's so complicated, and the process is dehumanizing and difficult, and um, yeah, it really does open your eyes to that, and then it does make you really really grateful if you are not in that position to have a home and to have a place where you have a passport to. Yeah, and many Palestinians are in that state. They're in a refugee state, or they don't have any paperwork, or their paperwork is not recognized, and so it tells that story too.
Well, I want to step back a little bit because I like kind of defining terms we use even more. And um, I got to meet at my first exposure to this recent use of the term collective liberation was getting to go hear two amazing human beings talk and share about Palestine and Israel from one was an former IDF soldier,
Okay.
and one was a Palestinian, and that was incredibly powerful and moving to hear how they worked so hard to find the common ground and hear each other's stories, and are still going to all over this country, probably out of the country, to tell people like what you were referring to, the
Mhm.
75 years of occupation and the different um, realities, the different like right there, the
Yeah.
different ways they were conditioned, and it's so honest, and it's and painful and enlightening. So collective liberation. They were on this show. If anybody
Yeah.
listening wants to go hear their podcast, they are two amazing men, and they have women and other people helping them organize um, to keep the keep this conversation going and this education going. Um, so there is a show called Collective Liberation. And so tell me more what embracing collective liberation means to you, and what embracing it means to you,
Yeah.
and what it is.
Yeah. So, and actually, I just wanted to say, so Ratam and Osama, who have Salt of the Earth, who I think is who you're referring to, they are
Mhm,
wonderful, and yes,
mhm.
they do speak a lot about collective liberation. It's interesting. I've tried to find like where'd that wording start, and I think it has been used. Historically or maybe not historically, but it's not completely a new term, but it wasn't a term I was super aware of, and I didn't see it really kind of rising into sort of like people's consciousness as much until recently. And it really is this concept that none of us are really truly free unless we're all free. And it really grounds in the idea that there has to be mutuality in freedom and liberation. Um, and I think that to me, feels so right and real around kind of feelings I've always felt about conflicts in general, but especially on the um, when thinking about the occupation and when thinking about this genocide. Um, th- there really is there is no way for anyone to be free, the oppressor or the oppressed, to be free unless everybody is free. And I don't believe that the oppressed is free, because they are also um and this comes a lot in the in Where Olive Trees Weep, this idea that the oppressed are also imprisoned in these in their fear, which manifests into hate, which manifests into violence. And so we have to aim for everyone being free. That mutuality is the only real way that you get you get justice, but you also, I think you can't have what a lot of people say, oh, they want peace, but you can't have peace unless there's really justice at the root of that peace. And that requires mutuality in terms of freedom. Everyone needs to be free, everyone needs to be safe. Not one group's security is more important than another person's freedom.
And you can't really have freedom if you're not secure.
No. So you need to have it be a mutual.
Totally makes sense.
And for me, that has been really helpful to have a name to it. So even though this term has been around, for me, finding that name and finding what that really means and finding the groups of people who are really for collective liberation, it's really helped me be able to be an advocate and be and speak in really difficult situations where, there's a lot of emotion and there's trauma involved, and people, um, you know, start to get really angry, and knowing and being grounded in something where everyone is going to benefit, everyone around the whole world, because it's not just Palestine and Israel, this kind of
Right.
colonialization, white supremacy, all these things that are diminishing some groups over other groups, that is all around the world. And so I can feel really solid and really confident in the work that I'm doing because I know it's based in something where everyone is going to be taken care of. Everyone is going to benefit, and everyone will be free.
Everyone's cared for.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves safety and health and housing and
Yeah. And freedom and dignity and freedom of movement, resources like water and electricity and all the things that some groups have, but some people are not able to get because of us, a group that is either has supremacy over them, or in some cases, poverty is another thing. It's like resources. There are reasons why certain people don't have these resources and others do, and there's systems in place that help keep it that way. And collective liberation is about looking at that, understanding what those systems are doing, what they are, and working to change them.
I always like to ask people, how do you see, because sometimes just hearing um, the word systems
Yeah.
can seem daunting, like, oh, how do we change the system? But then I think systems, we run the systems.
Yeah.
The people run the systems. And I know I have been in some and I am in some. And it's it's so hard when you're in it and you're part of the, like, how the system keeps operating, like how do we change it? And how does collective, or how does embracing collective liberation remind me that I have power, and that there are places and times I can use it. Like, how do I help bring effective change to systems to reduce the inequities?
Yeah. I mean, it's It's such a good question, and it's a lot of what we're trying to address in All Free is not only inspiring people by hearing voices of people who are either um, in the collective liberation movement as as activists, or are in it as healers, or are in it as people that are working in the government and they're trying to like chip away at legislation. There are so many, and we've talked about this a couple times in our last two podcasts, is that everyone has a role to play. And I think the one thing that I want people, because right now we're in a time where it's really easy to just be like, I can't do anything because this is so big. Like you said, it's systems. Like, what do we do? Um, I think the way to think about it is, baby steps for yourself. Like everyone has a role. Everyone can contribute. And maybe at a certain moment in your life, you can't contribute a lot because you've got kids to take care of, or you've got things that are, keeping you focused elsewhere. But there's almost always something that someone can add to this movement. And it could just be a single thing that you do in a day. For some people, it's writing letters to their representatives. For other people, it might be donating to organizations. And some people are the people that are, leading the protests. But I think a lot of people, because protests are so visual, they think that's the only way to counter these systems, but that is not the case. I actually think one of the wonderful things that people can do is just talk about these things with their friends and their neighbors, and the people have the power. We do have more power than we think. And I think it feels like we are losing it right now to an oligarchy. And I just encourage people to remember that so many movements and so many changes in history have come from the people using their power collectively. So just talking about these things with people, what I'm finding is a lot of people believe all these things I'm saying, but they've been afraid to say them. They've been afraid to say them. They think it might sound super radical. I mean, I've been thinking this way my whole life, but I was silenced for a long time because it felt like, oh, it's dangerous, or it's radical. Which I think now people are actually embracing radical as like a good thing in some circles, and in others not. But I don't think these things are radical. I think they are kind of common sense. And I think if more and more people start saying it, I think the people have more power than they think. They just need to either awaken to these things or reawaken to them. Because I think a lot of people know these things as children. We know.
Oh, yeah.
I,
That's
as a
true.
child, knew a lot of these things. I felt there were so many things that, like, basically, I'm just going back to what I believed as a child, but was told I needed to just be careful,
Mm. Wow, that is so good. You just made so many good points, and one of them is like it's kind of like perspective taking, because even the way radical is used, and I don't know what you call it, pop culture or social media, it really has been a way to try to silence people, like, oh, like it's a bad thing, when it's like, actually, when I think of the values behind what is often labeled as radical left, is like asking for fairness, you
Yeah.
know,
It sounds like things that we
equity.
were told as kids were really good and important, but then when we spoke about it in sort of like
Yeah.
political terms, it was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
don't,
And
don't go
anybody in the yeah, anybody in the central moderate knows that's not radical. That's the ideals that are actually written down in the Constitution of the United States, which we've been working on for a long time to start realizing.
there."
Um, like
I Yeah, I think you're so right. It is a way of silencing people because people don't wanna feel like they're somehow on the fringe, or they're like their whole community is gonna be like, "What happened to you?" Right? "You've been radicalized." When you're right, a lot of these things, they're actually things that we all so many of us, like, can get behind. It's just that it's in the best interest of the powerful people and those that want these systems to stay the same for us to be afraid and for us to be silent. And so it's an easy tool to scare you, to say that you sound like you've been radicalized, you know? And certainly there are people that maybe they have been more, you
Mhm.
know, they've gone to
Sure.
a side that isn't great, but there's a lot of people who are saying things that are being labeled radical that, like you said, you and I can really get behind as just caring for one another and not wanting to see people oppressed.
It's what you said, it's like what we learned in kindergarten. It's like
Yeah, totally.
share, take turns, be fair. What would how would you feel if someone called you that name? It's like, really?
Mhm. Yeah.
It actually feels so much better to include other people than exclude because it's isolating and keeps us estranged, and we can get bitter in our isolation if we stop relating to people and start uh, s- I think tone really matters a lot. Like uh, s- uh, a young adult in my life is really good at challenging me and forcing me to like clarify, what do you mean by that? Like, what does that mean? And so much,
Mhm.
I think so often it's like, um, the tone and, are we sounding self-righteous? Are we like escalating each other's voices? Like that, that's when we shut down. That's when we're like, oh, never mind, forget it. I'm not even going to try to bring down this wall or cross this barrier or open my heart. But I don't know. I just thinking about how we communicate, like you were talking about, how important it is just to be talking to our
Yeah.
friends, to our neighbors, and we have to like be really patient and remember we just have a piece of the puzzle. None of us know everything.
No, and, I think that's one thing we mentioned in our, first All Free podcast was we hope that this movement is not a movement that like embraces sort of cancel culture and like just makes people feel like, oh, I said the wrong thing, so now I can't say anything. Because that, first of all, things change. I have evolved. Everyone evolves. We are all works in progress.
Yes.
And I actually think in many cases, people who have been silent or appear to be apathetic are actually afraid. They
Hmm.
are afraid that
Hmm.
they will get shot down because they
Hmm.
said something in one way that was wrong. And that's not to say like we should just say, well, that's okay. You can say these things, especially if we really disagree with how or what they're saying. But I think there's a way to say to people, unless they're being like openly hostile. There's different kinds of communication. But when people are trying and they make a mistake, I think there are opportunities for us to still bring them in, but discuss with them in a kind way, but firm, that this, didn't resonate or isn't there's another way to maybe look at it. And rather than just, throw them out. And I think if people were to see people behave that way more, then more people would stop being silent because they would know that there would be some grace.
Grace, that's such a good word. And I have to say, I feel very privileged to be able to host this show, and I can't do it alone. I thank God there are sponsors, um, because listening is a huge part of not just learning, but I'm not saying this is I mean, I listen obviously to my guests. I love it. I probably talk way too much. I should just let my guests talk more.
No, it's
But like,
great. I like the back and forth. It's wonderful.
and like in the world, at work, at home, in community, it's benefits me so much if someone says something that goes against what I was taught or what I learned or what I firmly believe. If I just be quiet and listen, just hear this other point of view, even if I think I know what they're going to say, or I think they were conditioned X, Y, or Z, if I stop and listen and it's genuine and like I really want to know how it hit this person and how they learned what this word means or that word means or the stereotype means. And just the act of being listened to can help open the other heart too. And sometimes it's just like I don't have to say my side at the same time even. It's kind of like about building relationship, building trust, getting to know, and having given the experience and having the experience of like, oh wow, that person really listened to me. I wasn't expecting that. Maybe next time we see each other, that we'll want to know what the other one thinks. But I just think that's a key part of building trust and relationships and understanding and empathy.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of what I'm referring to even, a lot of what referring to is really even within movements themselves,
Mm, yes.
I have seen I've been part of movements and have been part of like various groups that are really, they have a common goal, but then they kind of fall apart on like details.
Mm,
And details that then they start to sort of attack each other on. And then, the movement falls apart. And that's really a lot of what I'm talking about. Because I
excellent.
also want to be clear. I think I don't want to sort of say to people, you can't be angry and you can't like express your anger and you shouldn't go and like protest and be loud. Like, no, I think those are all valid and important parts of movements. Um, I'm
Absolutely.
more referring to like in conversation and when you're trying to work with people and you know that the person's coming to the table trying to work with you, especially in these movements, I think that grace is so important, or else we won't be able to achieve the goals of collective liberation. We won't be able to have everyone in this world have freedom and dignity and security if we are fighting about like the word and then we can't move on and we cancel people.
Excellent point. Thank you. So I would like to hear more about your local work. I know like the one thing is you're on the human relations committee for the city of Davis.
Yeah.
Can you share what role you play in that?
Yeah, so I am it's called the Human Relations Commission. It's a commission that was, I guess, elected by the city council, and there's several commissions that the city council does interviews with people and then sort of recommends people, and then there's a vote. And so I think it was like in May or June I was voted in, and July was when I started my term, and it's a 2-year term. And, I've been very involved in local kind of governance stuff, but this is the first sort of elected sort of commissioner role that I've been in. And we're really tasked with just thinking about how people are feeling within the community, how people are relating to one another. We do also manage a couple of events with city staff, like Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We also worked on Cesar Chavez Day. So there's things like that. But really, it's about kind of having a pulse on the community. And in many cases, commissioners are on there specifically, in some cases, to advocate for a certain community, make sure that they're being heard, bringing them into the fold so that they come to meetings. We have a meeting every fourth Thursday of the month, that it's a public meeting. We really only meet publicly unless we have subcommittees. And that's because of the Brown Act. Basically, everything has to be transparent in front of the public, unless we have a subcommittee where smaller groups can actually start working in between those meetings. I'm on 2 different subcommittees. So one subcommittee I'm on is the Cesar Chavez Day celebration. And then the other one I'm on is one for what we're calling MAPA, which is Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, and allies, and getting a sense of how they are feeling within our community. any sort of discrimination or feeling of not belonging or silencing is something that we want to make sure we understand, address, and make sure that there's opportunities for the city and our leaders to show support for those groups.
That's fantastic to have a place where people can go who have been intimidated and silenced and attacked when just trying to express their own reality.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been a lot of my work with the HRC, but it's not just the subcommittee. We discuss a lot of different topics, and we have people do come and they come and they have an opportunity to do public comment. They also have an opportunity to email us, and so we do get a sense of sort of a lot of what's happening in our community. I'd love it if more and more people knew about the commission, so that they know that this is a place where they can let us know things that are going on. They can be celebratory things that are happening within their smaller communities that we should be amplifying or letting others know through the meeting, but also for people to come and let us know when things aren't going well. And there's things that they think could be better about Davis in terms of helping them feel welcome and cared for in the community.
That's amazing. Did you say the fourth Thursday of every month?
Yep. And we have public comment in the beginning. And then we also have agenda items, and people can, they can get the agenda online beforehand. And they can also, we have public comment for every agenda item. So if you can't make it to the beginning of the meeting, you can come for the specific agenda item if it's something that you have thoughts about, that you feel that we should know about. You can public comment then too.
Just going to the City of Davis website, you can find all this information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you look, even if you just were to Google HRC, or not HRC, Human Relations Commission, City of Davis, I think our website would come up. And also I think it has the email that you can email, and that email goes to the commissioners as well.
Wonderful. Wow, thanks for that work. That's that's quite that could be quite a burden. That's something that seems like a very compassionate spiritual position to offer for your community members.
It's felt very rewarding. I've had a lot of people say that they feel like their voice is often not heard, or they feel like they are not comfortable speaking up or telling their full truth within our community. And so I think this is, if for some people, made them feel like they have an outlet, or more of an outlet, or at least someone who's on the commission is aware and listening and caring and bringing these things forward.
Well, I wanted to ask you again to say what watermelon symbolizes from your watermelon pages.
So the watermelon is a symbol that has been used in sort of the Palestinian liberation movement, because after the Six-Day War in 1967, and I think it was through 1993, the Palestinian flag was banned by Israel. So you weren't allowed to have it. Or to show it, or you would get in trouble. And so the watermelon has the colors of the Palestinian flag. So, and also it is an item that is used in Palestinian cooking. And so it became a symbol that people use to represent Palestinian resistance, Palestinian resilience, Palestinian freedom, and even sometimes Palestinian culture. So people use it a lot for that. It came out of this time in which they could not use the flag, but it's also become just a symbol of the movement.
Wow, thank you. That's very interesting, and And I don't know if that's well known or not. Maybe I'm one of the last people to learn this. I
Well,
wanted to ask
now
you,
when you're eating watermelon, you'll have a totally different thought. Yes. Yeah.
definitely.
It's in social media, it gets used a lot. So, but I have, I think people don't necessarily know that. When I'm been using it for Watermelon Pages, I'm thinking of it really as a symbol of Palestinian culture and voices, and so that's really why it's called Watermelon Pages. And we will be launching a podcast soon, and that'll be called Watermelon Voices, and that will be an opportunity to share and amplify Palestinian voices.
Speaking of sharing and amplifying voices, we have about 4 minutes. Would you like to share a poem that you wrote?
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, here we go. Let me just
Okay.
pull it up. It's very short, so we should be able to do it within the 4 minutes. It's called, oh, wow, I went dark there because I pulled up a screen here, so give me a second.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's called Rewording Erasure.
Hmm.
Okay. There were always missing words, gaps, omissions. Palestine, Palestinian. Left out, erased, or never written. Never written because the world didn't like them and my courage lost to my caring, until my caring found what really mattered, until I became free to use all my words, to write with more ease and truth, to write Free Palestine.
Wow. That is beautiful. Can you say what that has been like to find and express your own voice after having experienced not being able to for all the reasons you so well articulated?
It's been my own kind of freedom, getting out of this sort of cage that I had been in terms of, not feeling like I could express myself fully and not fully say my thoughts and my beliefs and even my identity, in some cases, like not feeling comfortable saying that I'm Palestinian. And it took a lot of, it took a lot of work to get there. And I mean, I think this is a common story for a lot of people. We grow up and the world tells us how we're supposed to be, and we create all of these layers on top of who we really are to appease and try to be what people want us to be. And there are some people in the world that don't have that happen to them or are better at shielding themselves from that, but I was not one of those people. And I did have to take off a lot of these layers that people and, well, society and expectations had put on me. And at the root, I found that there were things I had been afraid to be fully open about because of how the world sees Palestinians in particular, or sees Arabs in this country. And it was hard, but it has been, I feel like a much more full person being able to speak my mind and be fully truthful to myself and to others.
Hallelujah. That's just incredible. It's so inspiring, and I'm sure validating for so many people listening now and who will listen later. I'm just joyful for your journey, and thank you. Like, you're
Thank you.
benefiting so many people by using your voice in so many constructive, healing, intelligent, educational, kind, empathetic, affirming ways.
Well, thank you. It's great to be on the show and to be able to share my voice with people. So thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Watermelonpages.com people can find, and AllFree Movement people can find by going
Yep.
online.
Yep.
Thank
All
you,
Free
Deema
Movement
Tamini.
on Instagram and allfree.org online.
Allfree.org. Okay. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Deema. We will have you back.
Thank you. I'd love that.
And I want to thank our engineer, Rebel, and our producer, Dean Piper, and all the listeners and viewers. And please tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at Talk4TV at w4cy.com. And may we all have enriching conversations like this this week. And thank you again.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate